I am sitting down here with the folks from Warfighter Engage, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Let's start with Ken. Ken Jones. Well, you not introduce themselves, but say hello to us. How are you doing tonight, Ken?
Well, I'm great. Thank you for having us on the team, and I'm really looking forward to this talk here. It should be fun.
We also got Dave Kraus with us. How are you doing tonight, Dave?
Good, brother. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on and talking with us. And we also have Chris Ginther. Did I get it right?
Yes, sir.
How are you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, let's just go down the list here. Let's start with you, Dave. Dave, what do you do? Wait, before we get into that, I'm getting ahead of myself here, and the Sketchman does that from time to time. Ken, what is Warfighter Engaged? Give us how did it start? Because I know you're the one who started it here, right?
Yeah, I guess the story goes back 3 years ago. I was invited to Walter Reed for a Super Bowl event. It was Giants and Patriots, and I met a young Army specialist there. He had lost both legs, and I got into a conversation with him. And I said, you know what, I'll be back. So I was able to work with his mother to get back in the base, and I started going to the therapy sessions. And I met the head OT there, Eric. He was a captain at the time. Now he's a major. And he found out I was a mechanical engineer somehow. I don't remember. Maybe just we were talking. And he said, hey, I think he could do something for this guy's game controller. I think he can't really move his finger. He has some limited mobility. So I said, okay, sure. Let me see what I can do. I didn't know anything about game controllers at the time. I played, but I never really tore one apart or did anything to modify them. So I did that, and then he goes, oh, that came out great. He loves it. How about this guy? How about that guy? How about this guy? And they were getting increasingly harder to modifications. And I started, when I was showing up, there was sometimes a bunch of people just waiting for me would swarm me asking for stuff. So I worked it out with the major, and we figured out, it's probably worthwhile to just do this. He asked me to do it on a regular basis, and basically it was every 2 weeks at that time. And we set up a real group. It was like 5 or 6 guys at the time, and various injuries. And it just went on from there. The first request, I always say that, I was expecting a little bit easier first group. The first guy I met there was a Marine sergeant named John. He was a quadruple amputee, and he was asking for an RC car controller, and without arms, obviously. He gave me his controller, and I was like, oh boy, so we got that going. He started using his RC cars. Then he said, how about a PS3 controller? Figured that out. That was hard. And the other guys had all kinds of other things. And basically, it's 3 years plus now, and we're still going strong. Actually, getting better. Dave came on board. Chris just came on board within the last week or so, and it's going good.
Now, I wanna ask: Did you have a love of gaming before you decided making the adaptive equipment, or did the love of gaming come from sort of being asked to make this equipment and you decided to get more involved with it? Which sort of came first there?
I think. Well, I had been playing video games forever. Going back to when I was a kid, and the old Intellivision days, and
sure,
Nintendo 64, all of that stuff, and arcades in high school, and it just grew from there. I started with first-person shooters, Doom, Wolfenstein, Duke Nukem, all of those things. And as they got more and more, got better graphics, Quake, and, just kept going from there. But I always stayed with the shooters. And at the time, I was, I had an Xbox 360, and I was playing regularly. And it just, like I said, I was fine with the controller, but I never really took one apart and knew what was inside. And it turned out it wasn't so bad for the 360, but the PS3 controller was a mess. But I was already a gamer, and obviously, I stuck with it. I don't know if I would have stopped, but doing this work obviously kept me even more interested in it, and working with the guys, finding out what they wanted to play, seeing what difficulties there are playing some of these games, motion and movement and where to put things and make it a little bit easier on the more complicated rigs. And it just went from there, really. I'd never really stopped since I was probably, low teens and, back when you had arcades.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to bounce it over to Dave Kraus here for a minute. Dave, how did you come to be involved with Warfighter Engaged? How did you meet Ken?
I met Ken when I it was maybe a month or two after I got hurt. I got injured in January 2013. I had lost my left hand. So, in doing my own research into what kind of adaptive video game controllers were already on the market, I found there really wasn't anything out there. And I think I may have found two options, but they were really expensive and they were kind of over-engineered. They weren't really intuitive. So when I heard about Ken through my occupational therapist, and she kind of set us up. So the next time he was down at Walter Reed, I introduced myself, and we just kind of went from there.
And what would you say, your role is at Warfighter Engage? Why do you want to? I mean, obviously you have a personal reason for supporting it, but how do you help? I mean, I know it's a back and forth. Did you help on the design of your own controller?
In a sense, I mean, I think Ken already kind of had that kind of a blueprint for guys who were missing a left hand, that maybe some things he'd already done in the past, but I was kind of able to. And honestly, we work with everybody individually, so it's not limited to me that had a hand in designing my own controller. A lot of the guys do that, but I was kind of
Awesome.
I remember approaching him and kind of saying like, hey, is this what you're doing? Because I have a bit of an electronics background myself, and so I kind of said, I get the impression this might be what you're doing, and he was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing. And I said, oh, all right, awesome. Well, would you be able to put these buttons here and do this? And he was like, yeah, no problem.
And I can't even imagine myself personally. First of all, Dave, thank you so much for your service. I couldn't imagine myself what it would be like, to not be able to play games. I have to imagine it had to have been amazing to meet Ken and get that controller back into your hand again.
Yeah, man, no doubt. And, to go back to, I appreciate you thanking me. It is my pleasure. I would go back in a heartbeat. But, yeah, it was definitely, one of those moments where I think I can't speak for everybody who gets injured. I know for me it was less of a, oh man, how am I going to do this again? And it was more of a, okay, how am I going to do this again? You see where I'm going?
You knew you were going to play games again. It was just a matter of how.
Yeah, no doubt. The first thing I did actually, because I had my laptop with me at the time, because of course in the hospital I didn't have my consoles with me and stuff when I was in Cambodia, so I did have my laptop. So I ended up finding the Razer Naga Epic mouse, which has all the thumb keys. So I bought one of those, and I was like, okay, well now I can play like Fallout and stuff again. So that was kind of where I started, and then it was just a question of, well, what do I need to do to modify a controller? And then that was when I met Ken, and he was able to really speed me along. I like to think I may have gotten there on my own eventually, but it was definitely his expertise that made it, a really easy transition.
And I'm going to talk to Chris here for a minute. Chris Ginther, how are you doing tonight? You just recently joined up with Warfighter Engaged, right?
Yes, sir. About a week ago, roughly.
And what is your role? Like, how did you come to be about with these guys? How did you meet them? Give us a little bit of background here.
All right, so I'm a part of this gaming community on Xbox 360 called XGN. It's Exiled Gaming Network. It's very large, and it's very extensive in terms of its meetings, stuff like that. Its operations, policy, all that stuff. I was in a division meeting, and one of the senior directors, a fairly high-ranking person, came in there and was talking about this fundraiser and getting going on for these guys that they modify controllers to adapt to amputee veterans. And being a former Marine myself in the engineer community, I was all over that. I was way on top of it. Like, yes, let's get this going. Super psyched about it. And actually ended up starting up or helping start the XGN fundraising team. And, working with Ken quite a while on that. Gaming with him and stuff like that on there. Live streaming with him and everything. And one day we just kind of talked about it a little bit, and kind of just became part of the team just slowly, I guess, over the past few months, but just finally officially, about a week ago or so.
Fantastic. That's awesome. That's amazing, to do the streaming, and gamers really, when you hook on to gamers, they really do want to help, don't they?
Yeah, everyone so far, yeah. There's not one person that I've talked to about this. Hey, we're doing this fundraiser, like in a public lobby or something like that on Call of Duty or whatever the case may be, and like, yeah, we're doing this fundraiser for these guys that they do this and they're all about this, and not one person has been like, yeah, hey, how can I not help out with this kind of thing? Like, everybody's been on board all the time. People have asked to party up with me and everything like that, to be a part of the live stream and just help talk about it and everything. And people have been donating and stuff just because of that. People are really intense about this stuff.
It's good to hear that the gamers are giving back and giving support to this cause. Ken, I'm going to go back to you just a moment. And I had come across the article myself about one of your first projects here and making the RC controller. That has to, I mean, how do you, when you sit down to do something like that, how do you come up with it? How do you even think about the idea to do that?
Yeah, that was John. That was one of the first guys in the group. And I really didn't even know how the RC controller worked because I never had RC cars that you can use a controller like that. I always had like my son's, junk toy RC cars. So I brought it to work. There's an electrical engineer there, Nick. He's a great guy, and he goes, "All right, let's take it apart." So we opened it up and we figured out how to adapt the trigger and the steering system in there to a single joystick that could clamp to his wheelchair when he needs it, and it would put it at the right elevation. It was an adjustable arm, and basically we made it so you could switch it back to normal and unplug the joystick, the external joystick, or plug it back in. But basically, it was just a way of mimicking what's going on, but remotely for him. So John had a lot of RC cars, and obviously he couldn't use them anymore, and he definitely wanted to get back to doing that. He had a nice piece of property with his new house, and to be able to run around the yard with that was very good for him.
To be honest, when I look at the equipment, not just the RC car, but over some of these controllers, it almost reminds me of like watching them do a build on Mythbusters. You really have to get in there and reverse engineer these things, and then you have, giant buttons and all the gizmos. That has to be maddening to try and follow all the wires. And I mean, I can't even imagine. Is it different for each? I mean, obviously it's different for each person. And do the people you work with talk about their input? How much they're involved in the design of the product?
Yeah, well, there's a huge range of game controllers and modified game controllers. Sometimes they're just a couple buttons. Dave's system is relatively easy. I don't know how much simpler to get from that. But it's basically just relocation of a couple of buttons to make it easier. But some become a little tabletop. There's a bunch on the website. You can see that, and there's varying versions of that depending on what you're missing and length of what you're missing. What's left and how to reach the controls. And like Dave said, every single guy is unique. Even guys missing a hand, they're all unique. They all have slightly different injuries, but you really got to work with each individual guy, spend time with them, understand what they're trying to accomplish. The more complicated the system and the injuries, the more time you really need to kind of flesh that out. So, you design things. I work, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I work on a 3D CAD system at work when I need it. And so I was able to basically model up, and with a cheap 3D printer at the office, I'm able to make some of these housings and little adapter pieces and who knows what, and put them on there, mount them, and working with the guys. Usually what I have is like a toolkit of different types of things: big joysticks, small joysticks, remote one, whatever it is, buttons for the main buttons on the right side, and different arrays. And I'll sit down with them and show them different ideas, and we'll kind of decide on a starting point, and I'll construct something, basically a prototype that kind of works. Electrically, it always works, but it's kind of maybe not ideal for the person. And we'll go through that. He'll try to play or whatever we're going to do, and find out what's bad about it. And I always tell these guys, please tell me that it sucks if it sucks. Just be honest with me. Don't say it's great and then you're never going to use it. Tell me what's wrong with it. If it takes 20 shots to get this right, we'll do it 20 times. And sometimes they change dramatically. It might go from extremely complicated, and as we're going along, they're healing, and sometimes they're getting better motion, range of motion, different feel on their nubs or whatever it is. So we'll make changes, not just for better control, but also because they're healing, and things are different on them now over a period of months sometimes. And hopefully we settle on a design, and that's what they stick with. And I always tell them a lifetime warranty. So, really, they can't get these fixed, anywhere. They're highly modified. They can't go to a GameStop or wherever you would bring these things and get it repaired, or they're, customized severely sometimes. That's it. It's really working with them to get the most ideal thing we can make. And a lot of them, look on the website, they look like train wrecks, they're just contraptions sometimes, but they work, and it comes down to, it doesn't matter what they look like. They don't have to be elegant, they don't have to be, streamlined, they just have to function. Color doesn't matter. I try to make things a little bit nicer, but it really, doesn't matter what they got. If they're going to play, they're going to play. Doesn't matter.
Now, I'm looking at the pictures, and as you said, various devices. We have foot pedals, we have big joysticks, little joysticks. None of these components exactly look like they were meant to go together. Where do the parts come from, and what happens when you have to make a part?
Yeah, well, I guess when I first started doing this on a regular basis 3 years ago, I used to like scour flea markets and odd places to find like anything I might possibly use from like bracketry and even sports equipment that I could steal pieces of for locating brackets and mounts to different whatever store had junk stuff or used controllers or whatever. So I was getting it there. Then later on, obviously, I was once I kind of got a better feel for some of the more complex systems. I kind of knew where to go. I really wasn't using old beat up controllers anymore because it turned out I really didn't need a lot of them. I was able to get newer stuff, but the most serious parts, a lot of those are custom designed and modeled and 3D printed. And that's the only way, because they don't exist on this planet, really, to help them.
Made from scratch, huh?
Yeah, designed from scratch and grown from, a chunk of ABS plastic, basically, a filament, and it works perfect for them. And if it's not, I could change it. I could, make it higher, lower, more left, more right, more, up, down, whatever I need to do. So sometimes, depending on the little component, I might have to do 3 or 4 different things just to get it perfect. Other times it's first shot. You don't know. But the ability to basically design and create anything you want or anything you need for within the realm of these modifications is great.
That is just amazing. We know what technology can do. Dave, we met you at PAX, and you were at PAX South, and you were at PAX East. Talk a little bit about like the public reaction when you go and talk about Warfighter Engaged at these public places and meet with other gamers, and how do they respond to what you guys are trying to do?
Everyone I've talked to has responded very, very positively. I've had the very good fortune of being introduced to some really cool people that I've been fans of, internet reviewers, of course, tons of other just gamers, other organizations. And a lot of people are into it. Obviously, I'm into it as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And it's just,
Sure.
I think it's one of those things that, like myself, it was one of those things where you don't think about the fact that there's a need for it until you meet somebody that's doing it, or unless you know somebody that is in need of it. And even for folks that I've met that would have the greatest use in the world for something like this. When I mention what we do, I see that look, like the light just flipped on, and they're like, "Wait a minute, you can do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Here's my card. Give me a call. Let's work something out."
Which sounds a little Star Trek-y, right? That you can, we finally enter this place. No, man, we'll just rip that controller apart and make you up a new one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I just met a gentleman at PAX East. He's not a veteran, but he's got. I want to say, and I forget, if he's listening, forgive me if I messed this up. If I remember correctly, he has a degenerative disease in his bones or something with his nerves. He's got some severely reduced mobility in one of his hands, and then some slightly less severe movement restrictions in his other hand. So, and it was just something where he said, I play, but I guess, he has a lot of difficulty doing certain things, playing certain types of games. So, I imagine this gentleman has grown up with this condition his entire life, and nobody's ever, either he never thought of it, or maybe he didn't know if there was anybody who could do it for him. So, of course, I gave him my card. I asked him to give me a call, send me an email. So I'm actually hoping to hear from him shortly so I can help him out with something. But it's just one of those things you don't really think about unless you need it or somebody needs it.
Sure. Amazing. Awesome. Ken, we had talked before, and you had mentioned some interesting people that have sort of helped you along the way with Warfighter Engage that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, in the beginning, like I said, I never opened the controller up. I wasn't sure what was going on in there, and I had to hook into the circuit boards and remote different things like joysticks and buttons and stuff. So, same guy, Nick, he's an electrical engineer at my office. He helped me a lot in the beginning, try to understand just how the circuits are laid out and what I really need to do to perform the modifications, which are mostly mechanical modifications. I'm not doing software. I'm not creating circuit boards per se. It's pretty much mechanical reconfigurations of an existing controller. You can't really make one from scratch because they all have to be built to work with the consoles. There's ID chips and all kinds of proprietary stuff in there. But he was a really big help, and there's also a gentleman named Jeff. He was an electrical technician. He helped with, in the beginning, getting me going with some of the real critical soldering issues I had, and taking things off the board, desoldering, removing stuff. And that was a real pain. So I learned a lot from both of those guys in the first couple months. And after that, I was on my own. I was able to do everything I needed to do. And if I ended up with some kind of issue on a new type of thing somebody wanted, I'd go back to them, and they helped me out a lot there.
Amazing. There just seems to be that there's definitely, there's a need for this, and there's a willingness for people to get this stuff done, and a willingness for gamers, again, to go back to you again, Chris. I wanted you to talk a moment again about your gaming network and how can people get involved? How can they get a hold of that, and how can they get involved with what you're doing with Warfighter Engaged on Xbox?
Basically, well, there's the website they can go on to. It's xgnclan.com. There's also like the Twitter, official XGN, stuff like that, and there's also there's the fundraising team that's actually linked in with that as well. Just XGN fundraiser on Twitter as well, but there's an actual team. I believe there's 4 of us now, but yeah, pretty much it's word of mouth spread. People can join in if they have the ability to either do some promoting or do some live streaming, or even just being able to be there in a lobby with us all and kind of keep the conversation going, keep viewers entertained and stuff. That's really all it takes. It's just having something to do while you're in there, basically.
Get in there and have some fun, and it's for a good cause and stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we did a lot of Warfighter Engaged stuff, and also Operation Supply Drop. We keep it very military oriented. We won't see anything with us about the breast cancer awareness, stuff like that, which is, makes it sound kind of like a douche saying that, but we're looking out for the guys that aren't off the ground. And everybody knows about, breast cancer already. They've already got millions coming in all the time. Warfighter Engaged in Operation Supply Drop, they do not. And that's what we're helping these guys out, because they're not off the ground. You know what I mean? Or we're not off the ground, rather. We don't have all these sponsors and stuff backing us right now. So that's what military-oriented kind of organizations.
Well, Dave, I'd like to ask you, we're going to be wrapping up here. Anybody who's listening out there, Dave, what would you want to tell them about Warfighter Engaged?
Great question. It's hard to pinpoint it down to one thing. I guess it's really just if I had to summarize everything, I'd want people to know we are an organization of by veterans for veterans. We want to look out for wounded warfighters. That's our focus, but we're also kind of out there trying to help out anybody who needs it. And for people who aren't into the gaming scene, or they're not video gamers themselves, they don't really understand why it's important. And one of the things I like to kind of explain to people who don't really get it is that it's about so much more than the games. It's about it's about independence. And believe it or not, for a lot of guys that are recovering in the hospital, when you're doing your occupational therapy, or you're going to physical therapy, or you're actively participating in appointments, those times, guys are good mentally for the most part. A lot of guys struggle when they go back to their place of residence, and now they're not doing appointments. They're not receiving, direct care from somebody, especially if they're single. And now they're kind of stuck with their own thoughts. And, for guys who were big gamers, this is a no-brainer. But you'd be surprised how many guys can maybe get into gaming as an escape from, the struggles that they're dealing with. So it's really, it's a lot more than just, here's a controller, now you can play games again. We really believe that there's a lot of healing that video games can provide. So that's really what we're trying to facilitate.
No doubt, you can even do a quick Google search and find a numerous amount of articles linking, recovery to video games and things like that. It's definitely way more than just being able to play games again. It's being able to, in my mind, it would be being able to grab a part back, right? I couldn't even imagine not being able to play games. Ken, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you're doing for our wounded heroes here and for Warfighter Engaged. And I want to pose the same question to you. What would you want people out there listening to know about Warfighter Engaged?
Like Dave said, good question. Well, one of the things is to drop back a little bit. Dave, mentioned, we do other things, and we do other things. It's beyond gaming, and I tell people, I said, don't just think of gaming, think of other things, personal products, other recreation, sports, independence things, stuff you may be able to buy already, but they stink and they just don't work for you. They may, because they're designed for the masses, not for that guy sitting there with that injury. So we try to address that too. Dave's been doing music equipment with the Music Corps at Walter Reed, and that's starting to get a little bit better. Yeah, so that's really getting us into a different community. And another thing is that, you know, I'm not a veteran, so I'm doing what I can. You know, I do what I can to honor these guys, but you know, we try to. It was really set up to help the veterans, because it started at Walter Reed. I've worked now with guys down in Fort Sam Houston, guys at Balboa, a lot of guys at their houses now that they're retired or back at their homes. So it's remote. It's kind of hard to deal with sometimes, you know, a lot of back and forth. But, you know, what Dave said before is that there was this guy that had degenerative issues. I don't know, maybe it was ALS or something, I'm not sure. But if it makes his life better, let's do it for this guy. And if there's a little kid that got hurt and he was, you know, my son's 8 years old. If something ever happened to him, he'd be devastated. He couldn't play. And there's a lot of kids that age that play. We'll do our best to help them too. We're not saying opening the floodgates, say anybody come here, but it's specific cases. There's some burn victims down in Fort Sam Houston that Major Eric Johnson is working with that are civilians, and he said this would really make a big difference in their lives if they could play video games again. So I trust his judgment. If he's, you know, if they're just civilians, we'll help them out. We'll case by case basis. We'll do the best we can. But I think what I want to say really is that is really to ask people to spread the word, because we need the word to get to people out there that don't know we exist and could really benefit from us. We ask a lot of the guys we work with to tell their friends, or if they're on their Facebook page, share stuff out. So, you know, and that's how we're getting new people, and from word of mouth, and it's always worked that way. But there's so many out there that we missed, or I missed, from, you know, 2002 to 2010, 11, 12. You know, I'll never see these guys. So unless there's a word of mouth assistance there, you know, we're missing those guys, or those guys are missing us. And that's just Walter Reed. You got all the other hospitals. There's people in VAs. There's people that never went to the major hospitals due to their injuries. Like I just hooked up with a soldier. He had a stroke due to a rollover. And I asked if he went through Walter Reed, and his wife said, well, he was there for like a week, then he got transferred to a hospital in Oklahoma. I never would have saw this guy, even if I was there.
Right.
He would have been in like a TBI clinic or something like that, where these guys aren't amputees, so they don't come down to the kind of the amputee therapy areas. So they're all missing the opportunity to play again, just because maybe their left side is dead, you know, and they can't use that side. Well, we can still help them, right side, whatever. So we're trying to reach those guys too. It's not just missing limbs. It's mobility. It's you know, these guys are just fine. They just can't use their hand on one side or whatever it is. But if we could get to them, we'll figure it out and we'll get them going again.
Amazing, Ken. And you know, I'll start with you, Chris. Thank you so much for the work you're doing here with Warfighter Engaged, and thank you for coming on and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Do you mind if I touch on something real quick that Dave was talking about a few minutes ago?
Go for it, sir.
Yeah, about the you know, Warfighter Engaged and the gaming and all that stuff and everything. And people seem to think it's kind of minute, you know, helping out somebody with, you know, video gaming, like they got more stuff to worry about and everything. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that they're getting this return to normalcy they used to have. You know, like some of these guys are missing, you know, both hands and everything, and they can't do a whole hell of a lot. But there's one thing now, at least, that they can get back to doing and have some sort of return to normalcy, some sort of individuality, I guess, so to speak, and not relying on anybody else to help them out and everything. It just gives them a bit of themselves back doing that. It's not about the games. It's really about the individual person that gets to do something on their own again. And that's really what this whole thing is about. And that's why I love it so much. It's not just the gaming. It's the person.
Well, thank you. That's just amazing. Well said. Dave, thank you for coming on, speaking with me as well. Thank you for your work with Warfighter Engaged, and as I said before, your service to our country, man. It's just amazing.
Yeah, thanks a lot, brother. You know, again, I appreciate you having me on. I did just want to throw out before we move on to another subject matter, I presume. You know, for those of you listening, if you want to go check us out, we're at warfighterengaged.org. You can pull us up on Twitter at WFEngaged, and you can also look us up on Facebook if you're so inclined. Or if you're just one of the 10% of the population that still uses Facebook, you can look us up at, Warfighter Engaged.
Awesome. And Ken, thank you again. Thank you for coming on and speaking with me and taking the time to tell everybody what Warfighter Engaged is all about, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sketch. This was a lot of fun, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about it and get the whole team together. Dave's been an amazing help, and one thing I keep telling people is that he drops the average age down by about a third. And I guess with Chris, it's been even better. But he's really helping out with the
awesome.
gaming areas, and Chris, I think there's a lot of things we're going to be doing together, and his help with social media and bringing the gaming community in to help support us and help us grow is a big deal.
Well, again, thank you guys for coming on, talking with me. It's been a pleasure.